Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Ephraim Mattos, and he's here today to share with us his new book, City of Death, Humanitarian Warriors in the Battle of Mosul. Now, Ephraim is a former U.S. Navy SEAL, and he teamed up with New York Times bestselling author Scott McEwen, who's also the writer of American Sniper. In City of Death, it tells an unforgettable story of an American warrior turned humanitarian forced to fight his way into and out of a hell on earth created by ISIS. So let's welcome to the show, Ephraim Mattos.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
What a pleasure it is to have you here, and of course to talk about your new book, City of Death. My goodness, I mean, it's a heart-wrenching read.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's some difficult it's difficult subject matter, but it's also important, and in the end, as you know, it has an uplifting message, and that's what really matters.
Well, and before we dive too much into the book, I would like to start off with, what made you decide to become a Navy SEAL? Because, I mean, we know that's like the elite in our military. What made you decide to become a Navy SEAL?
Well, honestly, my biggest drive to be a SEAL was first of all, I wanted to serve other people. I wanted to help people. That was my main drive. But I wanted to do that in a way that, maybe other people couldn't. I wanted to help the people that no one else could help. And I wanted to be in that position where I could reach those people who, other people might have wanted to help, but just simply couldn't. And so that was my drive to be a SEAL specifically. And, and I'm really glad I got the chance and the honor to serve in the SEAL teams.
Well, we're so glad that you have as well, and all the wonderful service you've done for our country. My goodness, it's just amazing what Navy SEALs go through just to get to that place where they're in service as well. When you left, when you retired and you left the Navy SEALs, was there? Did you know immediately that you were going to start working with the Free Burma Rangers? How did they even get on your radar?
Well, actually, my brother had done humanitarian work around the world. He'd been to dozens of countries, literally, around the world doing different humanitarian projects. And I knew that I was going to get out of the SEAL teams, and so I asked him if there were other places in the world where they could benefit from a Navy SEAL helping them out. And I knew about the different conflicts going on around the world. There's all kinds of conflicts going on in Africa, then obviously the Middle East, and even in Southeast Asia. And so my brother told me about a group called the Free Burma Rangers about a year before I got out of the Navy. And so I started looking up what they did and who they were, and I got in contact with them, and I realized pretty quickly that, all right, I don't know where my life is going to take me now that I'm getting out of the SEAL teams, but I'm going to go volunteer, and I'm just going to go work with these guys because I believe in their cause. And whatever else happens in life will happen. But so that's how they got on my radar. And then when I got out of the Navy, I was actually technically still on terminal leave when I left the Navy and went to join these guys in Iraq. I flew to Iraq while I was still technically an active duty SEAL. But I'd done all of my separation paperwork, so it wasn't a big deal. Then I went over there to do humanitarian work with those guys in the war zone of northern Iraq.
That's really interesting. They must have. It was probably just in that point where you're having that separation from the military when and becoming a civilian when all that happened. And so when you got over there, my goodness, did you have any idea what you were getting yourself into?
No, not in the slightest. I obviously knew about ISIS. I knew and understood warfare, right? Because this wasn't my first time in that sort of environment. But my initial reason for going there, it was I just wanted to do humanitarian work, and I figured, well, I can go do humanitarian work anywhere in the world. Might as well go, to a war zone because I know how to function in that environment. We'll be armed. I know how to use weapons. If we get attacked, we'll defend ourselves. But there was, in my mind, I thought it was just going to be doing medical clinics and handing out water bottles and maybe, helping evacuate, wounded people or something like that. That's what I imagined. And that actually was true. For the first month that I was in Iraq, and I talk about it in City of Death, where the first month, that's mostly what we did. But what happened, though, is the Iraqi army unit that we were attached to provide medical support for and also provide humanitarian relief for when they would free Iraqi villages from ISIS. That same unit was ordered to turn around and attack West Mosul to break the stalemate. And at the time, the battle for Mosul was the most bloody and deadly urban battle that the world has seen since World War II. And we were ordered, our unit was ordered to hit ISIS and as sort of a shock attack on May 4th of last year. And we went with them as combat medics, essentially.
Wow. It's just, your book is just so amazing. It really details, what you experienced, how you were feeling, and, going through all that. And we hear about Mosul and ISIS on TV, in the news, but I don't think anyone really understands what people are going through over there.
Well, absolutely. And here's the thing too. You know what? I come back to the U.S. and people always say, "Oh, I don't understand. I wish I understood." And I always tell them, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you don't understand. You're not supposed to understand, what it's like to have ISIS running through your streets, killing people. You're not supposed to know. And that's all right. That's why we do what we do, is so that people don't ever have to know what that's like. And I wrote the book, I wrote City of Death, because I wanted people to get a glimpse of of the historical significance of what was happening. And I wanted them to know about the courage of the Iraqi army, who was going in there and dying by the dozens every day to take back these city streets and rescue and free all these people from ISIS. And I wanted to tell the story because people need to know about the suffering of the Iraqi people and all those crazy things that happened. So, that's why I wrote the book, because I want to sort of raise some of that awareness, but I also don't want people to feel bad because they don't fully understand, Yeah. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It's almost like you have to be there, and have, as you were as a humanitarian warrior, helping people in order to really get a full understanding of what it's like, being in that situation. And did you find that it was much different? I'm sure it was, but, just like what some of the differences were, just being there humanitarianly as opposed to, with your Navy SEAL brothers?
Oh, absolutely. So, ironically, I had never been to Iraq before. When I was in the Navy, I was sent to Southeast Asia, and then I'd also deployed to the Middle East and Afghanistan. So I'd fought in Afghanistan, but I'd never been to Iraq. And so as far as the Iraq experience itself, that was a first-time thing for me. But yes, it was absolutely different being in this combat zone with a group of guys who I've literally just met. None of them were former SEALs, but they were all good guys. We had two of the guys were former Marines. One guy was a former Army officer who drove tanks, and then two of the other guys were former Green Berets. And so, I'm with a high quality group of guys, and so it was actually very easy for us all to get along and to do what needed to be done over there. But yes, it was definitely different not having air support or proper medics or body armor or proper weapons or any of that sort of stuff. It was definitely a different experience.
Yeah, it's really like all on you in that moment to get through things. It's not like like you're saying, you can't just call for support. It's it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. You're out there alone, working directly with the Iraqi army too. So you got it. So we had a couple of interpreters with us to help us, speak to the guys that we're trying to help. And actually, one of our interpreters was actually shot and killed during one of the opening battles of the assault into West Mosul. And so I write about him in the book as well. And it's very unfortunate, but Yeah, we all got along really, really well. It was interesting to take a bunch of guys from different places in the U.S., different military backgrounds, and then you put them in a totally different country with a totally different religion, a totally different culture, totally different language, totally different history, and everybody gets along totally fine. And that was a really cool thing to be a part of, working there in Iraq directly with the Iraqi army.
That must have been, I mean, I would think it would be life-changing, being there during that time and having the experiences that you did. It must have given you some great insight, not just in regards to yourself, but just people in general.
Yes, absolutely. I think one thing that's important, and especially now, in our current political climate, I think we all need to come together and realize that for all of our differences, we have a lot more in common than what we realize. So you can, the divisiveness and the suspicion of other people who think differently than you or look differently than you, all that stuff is unfounded, and it needs to go away, because one of the things that I got to experience, and I talk about in the book, is how we got along perfectly well with these other guys who are of a different religion and all these things, because we were all united by the fact that we believed in freedom and that we believed in liberty, and that we were all out there laying down our lives to save the Iraqi people. And that's why we were doing what we were doing. And that included the Iraqi soldiers who were trying to free their own people from ISIS. And so when you have that in common, all the other little things, race, religion, all that stuff just completely goes away, and it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it really, it just kind of leaves you with what really is important, and when you look at, people's freedom. And, it's interesting, there's a video that has been out for a little while, but it seems to have especially gone viral now, especially with City of Death being out, of you, and so people can have like an inside view of what it was like being there. But you were with a group of people in a tank rescuing some people. Yes,
absolutely. So there was, on June 2nd of last year, we came across a location of an ISIS massacre. They had killed about 150 people in the street. That doesn't include the dozens and dozens and dozens of wounded who they had shot just in the middle of a highway that cuts through the city. And we found that at the forward edge of the Iraqi army advance, and our small team, we saw several piles of bodies, but in one of the piles of bodies, and the bodies weren't piled there on top of each other. There were so many people had died that they were falling on top of each other when ISIS had massacred them. So in one of these piles, we saw children still alive and two men still alive. And we saw that early in the morning, and we knew we had to do something. So our team leader, he called the Americans, and he asked for a smoke screen. The American military actually put a drone overhead and saw the massacre, and then they coordinated with the Iraqis, and they called in an artillery smoke screen to sort of blind ISIS from what we were about to do. And then we got behind an Iraqi army tank and charged down the street straight into ISIS territory. Like, we were in front of the front line, directly in ISIS territory. They were firing at us from two different angles and also dropping mortars on us. And we got up there, and then this is where that video that you talked about was filmed. And David Eubank, our team leader, he runs out and grabs a little girl while my buddy Sky Barkley, a former Marine, and we step out from behind the tank, and we start shooting point-blank range right into the ISIS positions. And they're shooting back at us through the smoke, but they can't quite see exactly where we're at. And so we were able to get one girl and one man, and we started moving back. And as we were moving back, I actually ended up getting shot by ISIS. A bullet came from our flank, our undefended right flank, and took me out. The bullet went through my right calf, and I fell down behind the tank, which was backing up, and we couldn't tell the tank to stop. So I had to stand back up on the wounded leg and just keep moving. And as I was throwing a tourniquet on, I'm, literally tripping over the bodies of dead children, moving back under fire toward ISIS lines. And all that was caught on video. And I talk about all of that in City of Death. I talk about what I was feeling and like what I was what I was going through during those moments.
Did you feel like writing City of Death was a little bit cathartic for you, in many ways?
Absolutely. Actually, it's very funny. When I was writing City of Death, and this was actually cool too, because I wrote the book with Scott McEwen, the guy who wrote American Sniper, and but I did the majority of the writing, and while I was writing, I found myself multiple times just weeping as I was recalling these events. And because when you're in combat, when you're in these situations, in many ways you kind of turn your emotions off. You have to. You see these terribly horrible things, but you don't have time to react to it on an emotional level. You don't have time to get angry. You don't have time to get sad. You don't have time to lose your mind. You have a job to do, so you turn off your emotions. Well, when you come home, those emotions have to get turned back on, and when they do, it's this sort of outpouring of all this built up frustration and anger and sadness. And so as I was writing, I was, pouring my heart and soul onto these pages. And multiple times I broke down and just started weeping. But it was extremely good for me to get it out there. It was extremely good for me to write it down and sort of make sense of it all.
Yeah, and it was very important for us to read that as well. I mean, there were many times in reading your book, I was grabbing my tissue box, and this is your story is not just your story. It's a story of other people that you've encountered and what what people are going through right now. And
yes.
It's an important story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I talked about with Scott McEwen, again, the guy who wrote American Sniper with Chris Kyle. I told him, I was like, when we do this book, I'm not trying to write a book that's glorifying myself, because I hardly did anything, especially in comparison to some of the other guys who were out there. And I wanted the book to really show and showcase these other heroes who I was with, both Iraqi soldiers and American volunteers. And again, none of us were being paid to be there. We actually all paid our own way to be there, because we were just volunteering our time and our money and our service for free. And I wanted to write about these guys. And you mentioned earlier how you were reaching for your tissue box. It's been really interesting since the book just was released. I've been getting some feedback from guys, and it's very funny. Not funny, but it's very telling. I've gotten multiple messages from grown men, guys who I don't know, and they're telling me how they were breaking down and crying reading this story, because it's that powerful. And that to me is the biggest compliment, when you have grown men who really understand and can feel the emotion and whatnot that's on the page. And that to me is one of the greatest things about this book, is that it can pull that kind of emotion off the pages.
Well, it to me it feels like it's also allowed other people, men in particular, that maybe haven't had the ability to process this, or not even sure how to kind of process their own feelings about their own experiences that they've gone through, in the military or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the things I talk about in the last chapter of City of Death is sort of about that returning home. How do you return home from war and just expect to just kind of pick up where you left off? How do you just go to your niece's birthday party, and how do you just get back into normal life after you've seen the terrible, terrible things that you've seen? Life is no longer the same. You're changed. And so I talk about how, for myself personally, I had to overcome the hatred of my enemy. And I found that was the key to my own sanity coming home. Because what happens is, a lot of times, especially for men, we don't A, let go of our emotions, but B, a lot of times our first emotion and our first instinct is hatred and anger, right? So you have an enemy like ISIS. Your first instinct is, I hate those guys. I hate them, hate them, hate them. And I certainly disagree with ISIS, obviously. And but I don't hate them, because hatred is something that doesn't affect them. It only affects you. And all it is, this hatred is nothing more than a poison and like an acid inside your soul that eats you slowly, and it takes brave and chivalrous men who've done great things in combat and sacrificed for others, and then all of a sudden now they're coming home and beating their wife, or they're getting addicted to drugs and alcohol, or God forbid they're committing suicide. Why is that? It's because there's a hatred. There's something deep inside that they're bottling up that's destroying them. So I talk about at the end of the book how I was able to overcome that. I sleep perfectly fine at night, and I think that's an important lesson and an important thing for men, and I think that's something that men can relate to. And then also with my background, I was a Navy SEAL sniper, so if I can sit down and talk about my own times when I broke down and started weeping because of the things that I had seen, that tells other guys, like, okay, it's not wimpy. I can talk about, the things that I've seen or the things that I've been through, and it gives men an opportunity to sort of process those things in a manly way.
Yeah, and be able to be okay with that. It's okay to process stuff, because they're
absolutely.
And we're not going to get into it because people do have to pick up their own copy of City of Death. But at the end, you do talk about how you're able to get back into a place where, like you're saying, you can sleep well at night, and you're making you've made the transition. And so it one of the things I do want to ask you is in regards to faith. Like how big a part did your faith play in all of this?
So for me, I'm not particularly religious. Like I don't go to church on a regular basis or anything like that. But there were very Christian principles that allowed me to do what I did, and allowed the rest of us to do what we did and also maintain our sanity. So there were several verses, from the Bible, for example, greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. We literally talked about that before we went out and rescued that little girl. As a team, we talked about it, and it was brought up multiple times because we're like, okay, dude, we're gonna probably die today. Like when I was shot, for example, I was not surprised. There was no surprise. There was no shock. There was no, oh, what just happened to me? I knew exactly what had happened. I was waiting to get shot. We were all waiting to get shot. There were too many bullets coming in, right? So before we went out there, we thought, okay, how are we willing to do this? And we decided, you know what, we're going to do this out of love for that little girl, not out of hatred for our enemy. And then furthermore, other biblical principles of vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord, right? That doesn't mean that justice can't be done. That doesn't mean that you can't go and stop somebody evil from doing something. But it simply means that the spirit of vengeance, the spirit of revenge is something that you as a human cannot handle, and you need to let go of it. You can still seek revenge, but do it out of the love for justice, not out of the hatred for your enemy. So there were definitely some very deep religious, philosophical, Christian ideas that were very prevalent on our team, for sure.
Well, and when people look at that video, because it's everywhere, and just they get that firsthand, just them, you can hear the bullets, between that and not getting run over by the tank. I mean, it was just a miracle on both counts, because I couldn't imagine being shot and then now having to get up and walk so I don't get, so the tank doesn't, back up over me or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been very interesting too. Like you said, that video's everywhere. That was the worst day of my life. That all that stuff that was caught on video, those sort of 90 seconds from the time of me getting hit, falling down, standing back up, and throwing a tourniquet on and like tripping over this little girl's body. That was the most horrific, horrible, terrible thing that I'd ever experienced, and I thought I was going to die. Because there's more bullets coming in. It's not like after you get hit once, you're sort of out. Like no, the battle continues. They're going to try and hit you again. It was terrifying. It was terrible. And so many people have sort of watched that and been able to kind of experience that in some small way. And, part of me, that's why I also feel it's part of me is I feel required to be doing this kind of, to be talking about these things, because people can see what I've gone through, and then I can say, hey, guess what? I don't hate my enemy. Hey, guess what? I sleep fine at night. Hey, I've been through terrible things too, but there's a way to overcome it. And I hope that my message and the message of City of Death is something that can heal, that can help, and that can, encourage people to live better lives.
I think it does that on all fronts, and it really allows us to connect with our humanity in a deeper way and have a greater respect, for those that don't have family that's in the military, have a deeper respect for the military itself and what they go through. And yes, this was with the Free Burma group, but you look at just there's so much that our military and people who have served have to process when they come back home. This is just kind of a good example of what that could be like.
Absolutely. And what's important too, and I want people to understand this, even if you don't have family that's in the military, even if you've never been in the military, even if you're in the military but you've never been to combat, this book still can apply to you. The message of giving up the hatred still applies, because guess what? That applies to, things that maybe happened to you when you were a kid. That could apply to a business partner who did you wrong, and or a politician who you completely disagree with. If you give into hatred of that person, if you give into hatred of because of what happened to you or what you disagree with, that's not productive for yourself or for society. You can disagree with that person and you can seek justice, but you need to give up the spirit and the hatred of revenge. So the idea and the principle certainly does work, even for people who don't understand the combat and all that, and that's fine. But absolutely, I've already gotten several messages from veterans, other guys who fought, and they've said, "Hey man, this really helped me. I appreciate it." And that to me is the biggest. That's just so big to me, and I'm honored to sort of be able to kind of get that message out there.
Well, Ephraim, I learned a lot from it. I've never been in the military myself, but it was very eye-opening. The City of Death is I feel like a must-read, and it's perfect time to pick up a copy and give it to a person that you love. Read it for yourself. Pick up this as gifts. Ephraim, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
So right now I have a Facebook page set up, Ephraim Mattos, just on Facebook and also Instagram. And yeah, people can definitely connect with me there. Send me a message if you got questions or thoughts, and I'm more than happy to converse with anybody.
And connect with them. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Well, thank you, Ephraim. It has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, City of Death: Humanitarian Warriors for the Battle of Mosul. City of Death is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. I know this is listed as a hot read, so if you don't see it on the shelf, make sure to inquire with your bookstore about ordering it and having a copy sent to you. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.